Signalis, a single-player survival horror game set in a dystopian future where humans live alongside replicas, organic constructs that fulfill roles in everyday life. You are Elster, a replica designed for space exploration, and you follow her throughout the game as she seeks to fulfill some long-forgotten promise. You explore the seemingly abandoned S-23 Sierpinski, a state-of-the-art re-education camp, vocational facility, as you search for her long-lost comrade, Alina Saw. So, just as a preface to everything, this video will contain major spoilers for Signalis. So, if you haven't played it yet, I highly recommend you do, or at least watch a walkthrough of it. It is a really great horror experience. But yeah. Now, there are a multitude of fan theories surrounding Signalis' background, including conjecture about the nature of bioresonance, questions about who Ariane Young and Alina Saw really are, as well as if the events of the game are even real, whether or not they take place within a dream or the real world. However, in the interest of keeping the video below 2 hours, we're going to sidestep straight past that and analyze Signalis through a few different lenses to understand how the design of the game impacts its narrative and how that is communicated to the player. Now, what you're going to see in the background here for a little bit is going to be footage from what the game's false ending looks like, and don't worry, we'll come back to that in a bit, but for now we're going to look at Signalis' narrative structure. And what do I mean by narrative structure? This goes into the idea of how linear the game is, how much freedom the game gives you, and what directions its story can take. Now, if we compare this game to something like Life is Strange, we know that Life is Strange has different endings with many different things that you'll see based off of the major choices that you'll make. And unfortunately, that's different with Signalis. It follows a much more traditional linear structure, although that's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, what we see a lot in the game is as you play, you move through and explore different levels where you have freedom to move around, and eventually you'll hit a point, which is usually a puzzle that you'll have to solve, where you gain, 6 different goobers, 6 different items that you need to solve the puzzle, and you can move on to the next area. And in between, there's usually a big cutscene or a pretty big story beat that predates the change in the level. And this is what Jesse Shell would consider a string and pearl type design to the narrative structure of the game, where the player is given an area that they can roam and explore in, but the way leading in and way leading out of that area is going to be, for the most part, the same, no matter who plays the game. Now, before we get any further into the video here, I'm just going to include a segment of gameplay here just to show y'all what Signalis actually looks like, because what I'm going to be including in this video is mostly a lot of clips of cutscenes and other important narrative moments, but it's also important to understand what the actual gameplay looks like and how that feeds into the experience. So, obviously, what you can notice is that the game is a very retro experience. It's low poly, especially when you're moving throughout the levels. What I really find interesting is when we look at cutscenes, we get this kind of anime aesthetic, but also when we're solving puzzles, we temporarily swap from this top-down 2D isometric view into a 3D first-person view, and that actually causes you to feel much more immersed in the setting. It's kind of a dramatic tone shift that happens quite often when you switch between these two modes, and it's clear that what the developers want you to see here is that there's a clear shift in perspective that they want you to take. And what I want to point out here is that the functional purpose of what this serves is that the 2D perspective is much better suited to the tasks that you'll be taking while you are exploring the world. As you're fighting things, as you're looting objects from the environment, as you're looking around, that top-down view is much more suited to it compared to the 3D view that we'll see in a second here. Now, I think this clip here is a good demonstration of how the developers intend for the player to interact with the environment, outside of just walking around and exploring. A key element of Signalis' gameplay is solving puzzles that you find throughout the game, and most utilize the aforementioned perspective shift to create a more complex puzzle. The first person introduces more detail into the environment, which allows players to solve puzzles with more complex pieces, such as this lock, and also this voltage one with a bunch of electrical parts in there. Other puzzles will require the player to explore the environment to find clues or pieces that will help them solve it, such as this weird ring puzzle. One other thing I wanted to bring up about the top-down perspective is that it can feel clunky and limited at times. In fact, the whole game can feel that way. Elster feels clunky since she takes time to accelerate when you try and move her around. When you move your crosshair, there's a delay as Elster swings her arms to point in that direction. Even the inventory system feels limited. You only have 6 slots with which to juggle your weapons, ammo, medicine, and key items. The result is clear. Instead of feeling powerful and strong, you feel aware of your character's limitations. The developers want you to feel weak and scared, which is part of what feeds into the horror and survival atmosphere of Signalis. Now, quickly here, we're going to use this to touch upon the agency that the player has in Signalis, which is to say, not that much. Outside of obviously interacting with the world around them, the player can choose how they want to explore the game, but no matter what you choose, the same things still happen. You still experience the false ending, you still have to fight Falk, their beloved leader, and the only part that the player actually kind of changes is going to be the ending, of which there's 3. But even still, they aren't directly influenced by the player's decisions, as you don't really get any decisions to make. Instead, the endings are determined based off of how you perform throughout the game. One ending, the leave ending, is obtained if you play the most cowardly, if you avoid the most combat, if you stay in the safe spaces a lot, you'll get the leave ending. But the opposite, the promise ending, is what you'll receive if you are active, head first, fighting things left and right, taking a lot of damage, healing a lot of damage. And it's interesting to see how these things are calculated, but that's the gist of it, is that the player really only has influence over the ending that they receive. Now, it's time to talk about the false ending of the game, but right before we start with that, I just want to show you guys a little something. This right here is what the main menu of the game looks like. As you can see, when you move your cursor around, the eye follows it around. And just pay close attention to that. Now, let's get to the false ending of Signalis, which is easily one of the most critical points of the game. This is where Elster finally reaches the place that she's been searching for throughout this entire game, deep underneath the mines of Sierpinski. This is what you've been fighting for this whole time. Elster finds what remains of the Penrose 512, the space expedition that she was assigned to along with her partner Alina Saw, who she is searching for. And as we arrive at the Penrose, we're reminded that this entire time, Elster has been trying to fulfill some sort of promise that she made to Alina, one that the player is not really aware of. But as we continue through the ending here, we keep getting these visions, these quick flashes of this painting. And now Elster tries to open this door, seeking answers within the Penrose, but she is unable to. She is too weak, she does not remember. And as a result, she is rejected by the Penrose, falling over and laying to rest. And in those last moments, as her life slowly fades away, we can see that that eye from the menu loses its luster, its life inside of it, and remains still. And now as we return to that menu screen, like those many times before, it's the same. And now, as we start a new game, we see the same sequence yet again. But now, something's a little different. And by the way, fun fact, whatever button you click on that menu, it will send you into a new game. It doesn't matter if you click play, if you pick settings, if you click quit, nope, you're playing a new game now. Absolutely. And that's how the game is trying to tell you, no, you didn't just finish the game, we faked you out, haha. And now as you can see, the beginning of the game is a lot different than the original. The original, it's this cold and dark area, and now it's brightly lit up. And this is the Penrose 512. except this time, instead of being crash landed, it is alive and well in flight, and you are gonna do your job. You're gonna go fix it up. And what I think is so beautiful about this sequence is this comes right after like the most dramatic part of the game, where you get to the end and then you fail and you feel terrible. But now, for once in the game, you don't feel like you are being threatened by anything. You don't feel like you're surviving. You feel like you're at home. And this place is nice, it's lit well, and in a moment, we'll see who it is that's on here with us. So what do we get from this whole sequence? Well, what it is it serves as context for our player's entire journey up to this point. We understand that Ariane Young is not just our professional partner, but is our romantic partner too. We're offered a glimpse of the good memories that Elster had on board the ship, and this empowers us, both character and player, to dive into hell once more, and literally jumping back in. Very Silent Hill. And yeah, that's signalis. If I had a little more time here, I'd love to talk more about what the Promise is, and a little bit more about the background, a lot of the fan theories surrounding the game, especially because there's so much introspection, and that is an example of the fourth type of interactivity, which is beyond the game interactivity. But if you take a look through the subreddit, I mean, it's filled with a lot of people coping about the sad ending of the game. It's just altogether such an amazing experience that I highly recommend.